Big Mecha. Big Mecha. Wilhelm, are you there?
Yes.
Wilhelm, I want to welcome you to another edition of Big Mecha, but not huge. How are you doing today?
Doing well, doing well.
Well, that's a short answer, but I guess that'll be okay. Have you done anything mech related recently?
Well, let's see. I thought about purchasing a game involving giant robots.
Which one?
The Musashi one that Shadow launched. It's like
Megaton
half off right
Musashi done
now.
by level 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a. I've only briefly played it. It's quite fun. I because it is a level 5 game, it is very story heavy, very RPG oriented.
hmm
So you start off with the tutorial battle, and then after you do that, you get like an hour's worth of like cutscenes. So like I'm just sitting there skipping through everything just because I want to see what the actual gameplay feels like. Because the tutorial battle isn't worth shit. So like I'm
No.
skipping through all the different cutscenes, and once I finally manage to get to it, like 15 minutes later after skipping everything, I finally get around to actually getting to get the feel of it. Oh my god, it is by far one of probably the best mech action RPGs I've ever played. It's so unique. Like it doesn't feel unique at first, but then once it starts going, all right, you've got all these action meters, kind of like how you would with an MMO, where you've got like cooldown
hmm
meters and all that.
hmm
But then it also goes into super hype anime moments, and when it does that, it's like, oh my god, like everything that you do is just pure awesomeness. By far, anybody who enjoys mechs or level 5 or anything like that, please check out Megaton Musashi Wired. It is going to be it's not going to be a hit, but it's going to be a hit in your
No.
hearts. And I don't mean that in a bad way where you're probably going to have to a hospital. You know, I mean that in a way where you're going to feel like that you want to go to a hospital because it's that fucking heart pounding awesome.
So, heart pounding, awesome fun, not plaque just stopped one of the sides from working.
Right, exactly. Not something that I would have to deal with on a regular basis.
Oh, it sounds good. It looks
Great.
pretty good too. There's a tie-in anime that's like 30 minutes that I haven't even watched yet, but I'm guessing it's probably mostly preamble or a
Yeah,
bunch
you
of
were telling me
cutscenes
about
that they
that.
shoved into it. That was weird because the game came out, no fanfare, and then the anime came out, no fanfare, and I was like, "Oh, this is a series. Of course it is. Frickin' Japan loves mechs. They just never localize them because they are under the impression mech fans only exist in their home country." I don't know. Localization can't. So here's the thing.
Well,
I'm not a game
Japan, I
developer. I'm
think
not a
it was
game
actually a
designer.
bigger
But
hit because it was released episodically.
yeah. So Megaton Musashi, it shadow dropped, and obviously Mecha is huge in Japan. It has been for a long time. It just for some reason they never bring it over. And what confuses me is I understand things like voice acting costs a lot of money, take a lot of time, but especially with how prevalent subtitled content, not just from Japan, but pretty much anywhere, is in America right now. I don't understand why they can they insist on not bringing more stuff over. Like I know it's expensive and it takes time, but a couple of translators sitting around going through text can't, and then some people to like implement it in a game. I feel like that can't be that expensive, especially once you've already put in the hard work and built the game. We're not talking about porting the game to another console or porting it to a whole other operating system or anything crazy like that. We're talking about changing some text. And it's
Well,
not even
I
like
think it wouldn't be
big text like title screen, which is again one image. So,
I think it wouldn't be as bad if we're having to deal with anything involving, like most JRPG situations involving like Sony or Xseed, where they're taking over the Falcom stuff or anything like that. But with Level 5 a couple years ago, they actually dropped or not dropped, but they closed their North American studio. So their entire thing has been completely shut down.
they
So
did.
I'm
I
not
heard
even
about that.
sure how they managed to get any kind of localizers for this particular game. The fact that they were able to get it is pretty amazing, but honestly, I'm not sure how they were able to do it.
Yeah, it was surprising when I heard that they had shut down. They basically released this. as they were shutting down their North American branch. So it was like, oh, we got a new game coming out. Also, we're basically pulling out of North America entirely. It's weird, but it's just one of those things. And of course, because this is, I mean, they're shutting down the branch, so this was like probably the last thing that was there. So it got a little bit of effort, but they didn't push it heavy with marketing, really advertise it at all. They didn't even like send out codes to get a couple of YouTubers talking about it or some streamers, working on it and just being like, "Hey, this is cool, check it out," which is like the modern equivalent of super low effort marketing, where you just send out a few free copies of a game and like a list of, "Hey, wait until X date to talk about it, wait until this date to post," or maybe even not, just be like, "Hey, talk about our thing, show it, we don't care," and there you go. But it's
Yeah,
a bit odd.
level 5 is just, off right now, and I wish they would be able to find a way to reopen another studio, but I don't see that happening.
No, I think they might be. When you shrink that hard, it's usually obviously money. I don't. I don't think we're going to see a resurgence of level five. I think the market is just changing, and they're one of the ones who are shrinking because of it.
Well, yeah, again, like I said, that they had to close their North American studio. It kind of
Hmm.
sucks.
It does.
But I fully recommend it. I fully recommend that to anybody who's interested in that type of genre or into that type of game, or even if you just want some weird mecha sci fi bullshit.
Hmm.
Also, another weird sci fi mecha bullshit thing, I fully recommend 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. It is a Vanillaware title where it's primarily played like a visual novel, but
Hmm.
it is interspersed with some light RTS elements, and I mean
Interesting.
RTS in the strictest, lightest sense, as in, like, you can fully understand how to play it and not get frustrated with it. And it is by far one of the best sci fi stories. It's very anime, but it's by far one of the best sci fi stories I have ever experienced as a game. Will, if you have not bought it, I am going to let you borrow that the next time I see you.
So
It's so good.
what
It's so fucking
what
good.
surprised me was I'm pretty sure a YouTuber I follow mentioned it, and I think they might have mentioned it more than once. And
It's
they
deserved.
It's not, well, that's the thing. They're not huge into anime. They don't dislike it. They don't have a distaste for it. It's just certain heavy modern trends in anime they genuinely don't understand, and they're like, I don't get it. But they wholeheartedly recommend that game, and that means that to me, it has really, really good writing, and when it gets going, it's very much based off of its writing and its story and its characters heavily.
All right, let me see
So,
if I can sell you on this, because the way that it does it perfectly. So it starts off, as you would with Japanese anime type shit. It's this girl. She's in high school. She's very pretty. She's blonde, blue eyes.
we're not going to talk
And
about
all of a
that,
sudden,
but that is a thing.
whatever. Yeah. But she's going off, running along in this high school setting, and then all of a sudden the sky turns orange, and there's all of these things that are like suddenly starting to attack, and so she's like surrounded, and then all of a sudden it's just barren, and then now she's standing there and she's like, okay, it's time to do this, and she does like this little Power Rangers type pose,
What?
and then she warps out of the way into this giant mecha that appears out of nowhere, and now she's inside of the mech, and she's like, how did I get in here? And it just like, you don't know anything, and then it just moves on. It doesn't even come back to that until like chapters later. That's just the
Jeez.
way it just grabs you in. It's so fucking good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I fully recommend it, dude. Like I said, the next time that I see you, you're borrowing that.
Oh, I forgot to mention,
Um,
I did as a side note, I haven't played it heavily, but I booted it up to remind myself what flavor it went for. Wonderful 101, which is tangentially mecha because at some point there'll be a robot, but it's essentially Super Sentai. So,
oh, okay. I bought that on your recommendation, but I still haven't played it.
yeah, it is very much heavily tongue in cheek. It's meant to be silly, goofy. It's platinum, but it is meant to be silly, goofy, fun, weird. So.
Yeah, that's the platinum standard.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
But before we go on to anything else, I do want to let you know about something that I have been playing recently. I actually just
Mhm.
spent the last day and a half, or let's just say the last day, playing this game, and I'm sad that I didn't play this earlier because this was actually a lot of fun. I finally got around to playing Transformers Fall of Cybertron.
Is that the second one?
Yes,
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, the games done by Half Moon Studios, Half Moon?
High Moon.
High Moon. The games done by High Moon are really good. I never played the third one, but the first and the second were phenomenal.
I looked at the story for the third one. It's garbage.
Yeah, that's
Luckily,
when.
High Moon didn't do anything with it.
Oh, that wasn't them? Okay.
No, it was Edge of Reality and some other
Yeah, they made
company.
it seem like it was related, but the two that High Moon did, it is unfortunate we don't have more by them in Transformers, but just in general, because those were very well built games.
Now, did you ever play them?
Yeah, I played them both.
Okay, so if you remember in the first one, because I played the first one when I borrowed it from one of our friends a long time ago,
Nice.
and I barely remember it, but the things that I do remember is that you do have two giant boss fights on each side.
Right.
When you're playing as the Decepticons, you fight a giant-sized Grimlock, and when you play as what was it? When you play as the Autobots, I believe you fight Devastator.
Yeah, I think you do.
All right, yeah, that was a really cool moment. This game, Fall of Cybertron, trumps that like completely.
Oh, it does. Did you
Like
beat it?
I did. I it was almost in a one sitting playthrough, but
Hmm.
my PS3 froze because it's old.
Yep.
Um,
Sony don't
but
care.
wow, I really really enjoyed it. So for those of you who don't know what the Cybertron games are, it's basically a re-origin story of the Autobots versus the Decepticons, how they came to be and how they ended up getting off Cybertron.
Hmm.
The first game is all about how Optimus ended up becoming Optimus Prime. He was originally Orion Pax, and then he ends up becoming Optimus, who's a soldier for the Autobots. And then after a whole bunch of different events, he ends up gaining the Matrix of Leadership, and then ends up becoming Optimus Prime. Um, Megatron is just a power-hungry war criminal. That's the best way to describe
Oh,
that.
so War Criminal is, I don't think, a charitable enough representation. Megatron, they go with the origin of the pits, which I think is the best origin for him. He was a gladiator because their world was kind of effing dark, and
Yeah, it
basically the
was.
people in charge had gladiator fights a la Rome, where people would kill each other for the amusement of the masses. He was one of the best and became the strongest fighter in the pits. That's why everybody
Yes.
respects Megatron and why he basically kills the things that he doesn't agree with. He also
Yeah,
took the
that
name
that's
Megatron,
about right.
but
He also says in some of his quotes, anything that is considered lesser must be perished or must perish or some shit like
they
that.
went real
He's
heavy on it.
basically yeah he's basically Hitler.
Yeah, they
Um,
went real heavy on the if might makes right, if it's not strong enough, it's weak, weak is bad. They really leaned into it.
Yeah, yeah. So when you're playing as either side in War for Cybertron, you actually get to see a good amount as to why they do what they do and how they all come to a head. In the first game, it's all about how there's this substance called Dark Energon,
Hmm.
which Energon is their substance that they use in order to help energize, of course, Energon energize their beings and their life forms and help keep the planet, support the planet.
So it
Dark Energon is basically the thing that is supposed to be the super version of that, but at least that's what Megatron thinks, and Optimus thinks that it's going to be the anti version of that.
Yeah, they're essentially it comes up fresh and new. Neither of them know what it is, but they both know that A, it involves power, and B, you don't want the other side to have it. So they start fighting a war
Right.
over the supply of it after they've already been involved in a massive war because they've been fighting for a while. And
They've been fighting over the supply of regular
hmm
Energon.
which Energon is
Yeah.
interesting. The way Transformers work in at least this version is if they don't have Energon, they can't move. They're not dead because their spark is actually what gives them life, but even more horrifying, if they don't have Energon, they basically wind up trapped in their body, unable to move, which is an existential horror that a human generally doesn't know, except for those poor unfortunate souls who wind up locked inside their own bodies. Um,
Right, like the
yeah.
spark is their soul, but the
hmm
energon is basically their battery.
Yeah, it's how they run. It's also how all their stuff runs. So it's how all their
Yeah,
machines and elevators and ray guns and all that stuff runs off energon. So,
kind of a neat little, way to say, hey, look at all this oil here. But
yep.
anyways, so that's what the first game is. The second game is basically just a direct follow up to that, and it's basically the fallout of everything that happened from the first game, and
hmm
then everyone's realizing we need to get off this planet.
Everyone starts trying to get to the Ark.
Yep. So Optimus and the Autobots, they're trying to get everybody off the planet by using the Ark.
hmm
And Megatron is like, we need to stop the Autobots from doing that because fuck the Autobots. Let's go ahead and use the Nemesis. Let's go ahead and try to get off this planet. And then as you're going through the levels, you end up finding out that they've been doing their own research from Shockwave, who's this big purple motherfucker he's like the evil scientist. He's basically Tarantulas from Beast Wars, which I finally realized.
Yes, Tarantulas
Um,
is essentially a ripoff of him.
yeah. And he's basically just doing all these different things in order to try and understand life on Cybertron,
hmm
how things work,
hmm
how things die,
Yep.
how to get rid of everything, and how to make his own version of different Autobots, Insecticons, Decepticons, you name it.
Yeah, Shockwave is
Um,
always a scientist. If you really want to see how twisted and weird he gets, read the comics. It gets very dark.
but on top of that, he's also got this weird. I don't know if you might be able to help me with this
Hmm?
one. He's got these weird plant-like things, but they're basically giant snake tubes. Is that
Uh,
right?
that
They're basically, it's like if you remember Transformers 3, he basically destroyed the entire city of Chicago with them.
oh yeah, those giant pet things. The giant pet thing he had in that movie that just ate the city.
Yeah.
Um,
They're basically like giant snakes, but they're like almost part plant. It's really weird looking.
so he was
Um
doing a lot of, which is actually where the Dinobots come from. He was doing fiddling with Transformers, where he was trying to change them into other things because Transformers are very, very decidedly machine. So he, being him, decided to start screwing with it and be like, okay, so we're clearly composed of basically inorganic matter. What if I started messing with it and I made us a lot more like organic matter? If I tried to make us to be composed of cells, if I tried to mimic what cells and other biology do with our machine biology. And that's where the animal ones come from. Like I think in this one he created Insecticons. Um,
So
yeah.
no,
No?
Insecticons technically already existed. He just basically became the lord of the Insecticons.
Ah, Lord of
Um,
the Flies.
but that does bring up the question then, because I was a little confused by this.
Hmm?
I remember Grimlock being a giant dinosaur that you have to fight in War for Cybertron. Why
Uh,
did they make it seem like in Fall of Cybertron that he just now became a dinosaur, along with all the rest of the
So
Dinobots?
the Dinobots, I believe their origin for High Moon is supposed to be the second game. I think what you're thinking of from the first game is the gigantic, what looked like a Godzilla T-Rex that shoots lasers. That's not Grimlock.
Yeah.
That giant purple dinosaur that shoots lasers is Trypticon, who is a massive, massive Decepticon. Trypticon is
Oh.
so big, he can get into fist fights with Omega Supreme. That's how big he is. And
Okay.
Omega Supreme
That
is
makes
so
sense.
massive he can pick up Transformers like they're toys. Like a
That also goes
Transformers.
to show you my memory is shit.
Yeah. Well, no, it's I get why you're confused. Trypticon they really made look like a massive robot T-Rex. Get the whole Godzilla feel. But then they made Grimlock, the arguably way more famous actual robot T-Rex. And it's like, it's going to be confusing to people on the outside, guys. Come on. But yeah.
So here's the interesting thing about the second game. Each transformer has their own set of play style. Like
Yep.
obviously they all share the same weapons,
Yes.
but they all do play completely differently.
hmm
And that makes the game very unique and very fun
mm
and varied in that sense because when I first started, you start off in the second game playing as Bumblebee, who just straight up get murked, you know, right
Uh,
away, and then you never play him ever again. He didn't even talk in this one, if I'm right. if I remember correctly.
Uh,
Which
yeah, I
I
think
thought was
so.
funny because I'm like, oh, look at them calling back to that. But anyways, so after that, you play as Optimus, and Optimus, when you start playing as him, like he was so boring to play as. He felt like playing as a very slow moving, truck, and he just wasn't fun. And it wasn't until we start using the well, hang on. There are moments when you get to like later on with Optimus's levels when you finally get to see the bigger aspects, and I quote unquote bigger aspects of the game. And by that I mean you get to summon a giant transformer known as Metroplex. Oh
Yeah,
my god.
Metroplex be big. Like when I said Triptychon huge, Triptychon, Metroplex, Omega Supreme, they're all freaking chunky. They are kaiju for
Like
Transformers.
I could not believe that this ran on a PS3 because of that, and it also
It's
explains why my
impressive.
PS3 froze at
Yep,
one point.
yep, that'll do it.
uh, but yeah, Metroplex is freaking huge. So, but playing as Optimus himself was pretty boring. Then you get to play as Cliff Jumper right after that. Cliff Jumper, oh my god! First off, he's a variant of Bumblebee.
Yep, he's Red Bumblebee.
He's Red Bumblebee, but he has the special ability of being able to go invisible,
Hmm.
which is really cool. And I don't know why, but I'm like, all right, I could deal with that. And the fact that you can actually have these abilities on a cooldown, it's just like, okay, I'm really digging this. And then he also has the potential to go up behind enemies and do executions on them. So I'm like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. After you play as Cliffjumper, you move into Jazz. Jazz also has a completely different play style. Every time you also want to transform into them, they all have their different transforming variations. I shit you not, the way that Jazz transformed looked exactly like the way that they did it in the Bayverse, where he did his little fucking upside down like head spin
Hmm.
before he ended up actually transforming. I'm like, this motherfucker right here. But it was so cool. And then it was like, okay, I get where we're going with this. This is pretty neat. And then you get to play as the Decepticons. Holy hell. The very first thing that you get to do as a Decepticon, you get to play as what they call as the Combaticons.
Hmm.
Oh my god. I was not expecting this. I should have expected it, but I didn't. The Combaticons, for anybody who doesn't know, are basically kind of like Devastator. It's 5 different vehicle transformers on the Decepticon side who, when they combine, they end up forming another giant one called Bruticus. You get to play as all the different versions of those different Decepticons, which, by the way, my favorite one is the helicopter. I can't remember his name, so, do that as you may. But when you get to play as Bruticus, when they all finally form together, that was fun. That was legit fun. I had a blast because everything about him, he had a giant shield. He could basically his shield was this. It wasn't even an actual shield. It was basically like this twirling like Dinobot type tail
Well,
thing that kept going around in a
I think it
circle.
was
But it
the
basically became a
I think
shield.
it was the helicopter. I think it's those blades spinning.
Yeah,
He
it
uses
was the
that as a
helicopter
shield.
blades. Yeah, and you could shield bash.
Yep.
Um, and then you do your regular melee attacks, and then you could use fire. But then on top of that, he has his ultra attack that allows you to basically stomp on the ground and do a giant electricity shockwave. Basically, it was so fucking cool. Going decimating the Autobot city, just doing that. And then again later on the final level, when you're able to do that, my god, that was cool. I had a blast with that. Being able to play Starscream is cool, but it was also really short lived. But doing that Starscream transition to go to Grimlock, that was unexpected, but it was also really fun. The fact that Grimlock, he basically doesn't know that he's a Dinobot.
Nope.
He's trying to figure out what he's doing. He's super smart. He's also arrogant as fuck. He is trying to take on the Decepticons because he knows that they're planning something. He knows Shockwave is a piece of shit, and he knows that the Decepticons are basically up to no good, but he doesn't know what.
Hmm.
And when he finally does it, and he basically Shockwave ends up kicking one of his minions to help him learn how to transform. That first transformation sequence, when you find out that him turning into a T-Rex is through a rage meter.
Yep.
Chef's
he
kiss.
gets mad, he gets angry, he gets really stupid, but holy shit, does he get strong? He also
Yeah.
breathes fire.
Oh my god. Yes, he does. Absolutely.
I also will
Oh my
say
god.
that is
Everything about it was so
that is
cool.
one of my favorite designs for Grimlock is the one from that game. It is they still make it into a figure like every few years at this point. They just recently started going through and making a couple of the ones from the High Moon Studios game as Transformers toys, which
Really?
they look online at your retailers. I could send you a link for a few, but
Yeah,
look
definitely. And
online
I'll
for a
I'll
few
post pictures of it.
retailers. They're coming out again. They're calling them Transformers Gamerverse, indicating that these are going to be ones from the video game universes. So like they did Optimus and Bumblebee from the High Moon Studio game. They've, if not them, then third-party fan ones have done that, the Grimlock from this game repeatedly, because it's a really, really cool design for him. The sword looks really, really freaking cool. Everything about it is just, it's a very, very solid design for him. And
And it's being done by Hasbro?
these are being the Transformers Gamerverse is done by Hasbro, yes, 100%.
Wow,
It's
that's
made
tight.
they haven't made any toys for this game since back when it came out. I think when it came out I originally collected the Combaticons, but yeah, they haven't done any of those since. Hasbro is Hasbro. They make whatever they want. But they haven't touched that since, and I think they're going through another, like a little, as nostalgia goes, they're going through a cycle of like they're doing a couple of gamer ones. They've got that new Transformers animated movie coming out, so they're doing another push with merch that isn't necessarily specific to that film. Like, yeah, they're making stuff
Which,
for
by
that
the way,
movie, but
Transformers 1, that new animated movie coming out, we are going to have to go watch it. That way we can do a review on that. I'm just
I'm
saying.
okay with that because Katie and I were going to watch it anyway because it's the first in. So I am at a point in my life as a nerd where I enjoy fresh, interesting takes on stuff, and that movie in particular I see as the generic Hollywood hire way too many people who are A-list actors to be in an animated film movie that's also going to be completely G-rated, like nothing even
It's very
remotely,
kid
very
friendly. Yeah.
kid-friendly, bright, colorful. It's all of that, and that's the lens you're jamming Transformers through. They've actually never been seen through that lens before, weirdly. I know. You feel like in
Not even with the original
no,
animated movie.
like you think in 30, 40 years they would have gotten there, but nope. This is the first time they've actually done this specific like filter for it. And they shoved it into the pre, so they're taking the none of them are who they become. I'm pretty sure the girl in it's going to be Alita 1, who legitimately is a love interest for Orion Pax slash Optimus. Unlike,
Isn't Alita 1 the one who ends up becoming RC?
no, they're different robots. You
Okay,
sexist
my bad.
bastard. There's two
Hey, hey,
girls. They
hey,
must
hey,
be the
hey.
same character. Yeah, good job.
I love Transformers, but just know that I'm a Beast Wars guy through and through. All right,
Yeah, I
so
know.
you know,
The only women you're used to are the sexy ones that are also spiders.
shut the fuck up.
So, anywho,
uh,
they're taking the pre-route. So Orion
Air
Pax.
Razor, bitch.
I forget what Megatron's name was before that, but yes, fun fact: in many versions of their universe, Megatron is not his name. He took that as a title from one of the, depending on the verse and all that stuff. It's a name he got from history. His actual name was something else. He worked in like the mines and then becomes a pit fighter, gladiator, and basically becomes their equivalent of communist rise up, fight the power kind of thing, where he creates an army and they usurp the
Bro,
people in
bro,
charge.
fight the power.
Yeah, it's essentially that crossed with like uh, communist revolution a la Russia, China, like 50s, 1940s to like 1960s, that sort of thing.
Current America, anyways.
Yeah, we are, but that's essentially what they channel when they write him. That's also why there's a bunch of like art for done in that like the obey like uh kind of thing where they'll put an anime character or a random figure. There's a lot of that
Yeah.
style of artwork. Um for Transformers with Megatron and Decepticons because it's very clear that's what the influence was. Which, when they originally wrote Transformers, it kind of was a Cold War analog because it came out in the 80s. That's what they were going for. That's why they pushed so hard with um, the Autobots being so heavily for sentience, freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of all of that stuff against the Decepticons who are like, no, you must do what we tell you. You must do this. You must do that. Very authoritarian. That's the analog they were going for. So
Yeah, that about sums up Megatron
yeah, pretty
correctly.
much.
Especially if you read the comics, because that is the exact same way that they ended up portraying him in there. Not just the regular comics, but I'm talking about the comics that they did for the movie time.
Hmm.
Those comics are actually really well done, along with the novelizations that they did.
I only sigh because it's hard to find all that stuff because they'll print stuff like that like when it's new, and then good luck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's so
Yeah,
frustrating because there's not even like an online repository. Because if I remember right,
yeah. Your best bet's probably trying
uh,
to find it through a torrent server
ID,
or
I
some
think it was
shit.
IDW. They just recently lost the rights to continue. They finally lost their license to print their stuff. So with them losing that, all of their comics are now going to no longer be printed, and that's
Really?
because they can't, because they are not the ones in charge anymore, because they lost the license. It's gone to another company. So I want to say like a year ago or earlier this year, there was a Transformers channel I follow talking about like, hey, if you're on the fence about buying some of these digitally or not, you're going to want to get on it if you really want to have it or to read it because once they stop printing, it will become infinitely harder going forward, especially because it's Transformers. This stuff they never lost popularity. They just continue to go. So it's a little frustrating because, and this isn't the only media this affects. There's lots of media that have this problem. The media is really popular, people really like it, but then when fans like talk about stuff, they're like, so, as one of my favorite YouTubers put it, you go to Walmart and then you obtain
Well,
a
first off, name the
copy.
YouTuber.
Oh, you want me to? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is Grimbeard. He is a goth gamer who does videos on. You would probably like some of his stuff. He does.
Shout out to Grimbeard!
He does videos on different games, and he'll heavy focus on them and talk about them. Very the way that he deals with the idea of nostalgia and being stuck in it, and he's very tongue in cheek in how he relates to it and talks about it. But I enjoy the way that he refers to going to Walmart and obtaining a copy of whatever game he's talking about, half of which are lost media at this point. Yeah, because he's being coy about it, and you don't want to actually tell people to go basically commit crimes because they are slowly becoming more and more a thing. I read an article the other day about an ISP dumping malware to find people who were torrenting. Fun fact, an ISP was putting malware onto people's computers to find people who were torrenting things. So that's great. Pretty sure putting malware
Well,
on someone's PC is a crime, but also they were looking for
yeah,
people who
I
were
think they probably got
technically
that
committing
because
crimes.
China was doing that too.
Well, yeah, but China's a foreign state. So
Yeah.
I mean, what are they going to get mad at themselves for it?
No, but also, I think they were borrowing that idea. But also doesn't surprise me because, America. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, it's a little frustrating. It's just what I don't understand, and it just doesn't make sense to me. I get that in the idea of like total 100 years ago, business was you crush the opposition, you make the money, you take their territory from them, you make the money they were supposed to get, and you deny them, and eventually you starve them and take their customers. That's not really how it works anymore. It actually is the opposite. If they would all kind of get their heads out of their asses, it's okay for more than one person to make money on something because at the end of the day, you are still making money. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that you would completely hold and hide something so that no one else can make money on it because you need to make all of the money, but by doing that, you make nothing either, rather than cutting someone else a minor part, 10, 20%, whatever, then you get to keep the rest, or even it's 50-50. Again, any number above zero is a number above zero. So I don't understand the hold it in licensing hell, the oh well, you have streaming rights, but you don't have printing rights. Oh well, you have printing rights, and then that company over there, they have streaming rights. So if somebody wants to buy it, they pay you, but if they want to watch it online, they're going to go to this service. And it's getting so honestly confusing. And I just
I mean,
very hostile.
that's exactly the same kind of stuff that people are having to deal with when it comes to the Toku community. I mean, just look
Yeah.
at anything involving Kamen Rider, and Ultraman, and Super
Man,
Sentai.
there's a
All
reason
that
I've never
is all
watched
just
most of those
muddled.
shows because how?
It's because you
How would
can't.
I do? Like, half of them aren't printed here. Half of them probably aren't even licensed. And it's like I could just
Yep,
watch random bits and pieces, which is fine with me, but it would be nice to be able to like go to a service that could just have that. Because
you
I don't
can, but
know.
it's not legal.
Yeah, which again, it this goes with my friend Jared made the argument always that torrenting is essentially the fault of the person who has the original media, not the person taking it, with the rare exception of music where it is 100% theft and you actually cause harm. Beyond that, you are either helping because you're exposing people to it and your need is not being satisfied by the market, or, you know, you weren't going to watch it anyway. But now that it's free, oh, well, now you'll, give it a try. You have a subscription and you're like, well, I mean, I guess I'll watch it since it's on this service I'm already paying for. I pay $12 a month for this service. I've already watched 9 movies, so they're like $1 a piece. So they cost me almost nothing. I might as well
Hmm.
watch this one that I didn't think I was going to, and either I watch it and I don't like it, or I watch it and oh, I kind of did. That movie now just got a little more exposure. Maybe I watch it when somebody's over my house, a little bit more exposure. And again, it's because the people who own it aren't making it available, or at least not in a widely available method. If you are only doing physical media or you are only offering something on a very specific service, there's a chance you are shooting yourself in the foot. Though I understand very few streaming services will allow like multiple services to have the same show. I mean, this results in people literally hopping services to follow the show they like, which is silly, but how it works. But it's going to be
Absolutely.
weird doing physical media going forward.
Yeah, especially considering that Sony is, well, supposedly that they're also cutting down, or they just recently, what was it? They ended up firing or laying off 150 people off of their Sony disc department.
Yeah.
Supposedly that is involving just like blank discs, but I have a feeling it's going to probably involve a lot more than
To
that.
quote another person I went
And
to school with, the ideal version of your media and even like hardware consumption in the future, the ideal version is you owning nothing, renting everything. You rent the streaming services and shows, you rent the actual like hardware to do computers. You rent all of it. It's just monitors and keyboards plugged into walls, and that's it. All you have is an interface. You don't pay for anything else. He's probably right.
yep, that sounds about right.
I don't like that version because owning nothing means, again, Netflix's own shows, they've already started to vault because they just haven't renewed them. So the very first like Netflix original has, I think, already been officially, I'm calling it getting vaulted. It's gone. You can't see it on
Oh yeah,
Netflix.
that's the one with Steven Van Zandt. It's what he did after The
Yeah,
Sopranos. Can't remember the name of
they
it.
never released it as physical media, and it's no longer on Netflix. It's a Netflix original, so it's nowhere else. So that is now lost media. Not to mention the massive
But
studios
that
literally vaulting whole, finished, brand new films that they just don't want anyone to see. So,
that being said, though, some directors who have worked with Netflix, the guy who did a lot of their horror stuff, like the guy who did all their, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he did the movie Hush,
hmm,
um, where his wife was the main woman in the movie. But he does all the different like the ghost story shows. Like he did the Fall of House of
hmm.
Usher. He did all those different things. His first movie that he did for Netflix, Hush, was taken off of Netflix, and I guess because of the deal that he made with them, he's finally going to be able to do a physical release. So I guess it really all depends on the person who's actually, working with Netflix, because at that point,
Yeah.
but I think we're getting into a huge different topic going on in
So
there.
yes and no, because this entire podcast at this point has started with us watching a show from the 90s that, if I'm being honest, we're lucky is on a physical release because it didn't have one
Yes.
for a long time, and then it finally got a like Blu-ray DVD release not that long ago. So
Yep.
it came back, allowing us to now see it again.
Absolutely. But to get us back onto the original topic,
Hmm.
which was going to be Medabots, but I'm going to be honest, I don't think we're going to be talking about Medabots this
You
episode.
can push it to the next week if you want, and just keep those episodes
Yeah,
for then. Show's not going
yeah,
anywhere.
that's fine. I wanted to go ahead and bring up more stuff about the Transformers thing.
Hmm.
So obviously, we were talking about the
Yep.
Dinobots. So I may have mentioned it on one of our previous episodes, but I ended up buying this Chinese knockoff. It's not a knockoff toy; it's a third party.
Oh, yeah,
It's
yeah.
called the Kang Toys version of Dinobot Snarl, and they call their version
I
Volcanicus.
love that they
And
completely like just rename it, and then they're just every time I look at one, my brain's like I can see the wink. I could see them
oh yeah,
winking to the camera as they're like, it's called Wink Wink Volcanicus. Ah, okay, I see what you did there.
well, hang on. So it's it's the original Snarl, but
Hmm.
their version is called Stegzero. But it's a combiner Dinobot where if you take all five of them, once they release, they form the giant combiner known as Volcanicus. I bought this particular one, Snarl, and my God, I bought it based off of a YouTuber that my buddy Christian showed me. Christian, as you know, being one of the co-hosts from Toku for Two, he showed me this YouTuber by the name of Jobby the Hong. Have you heard of Jobby?
Sounds vaguely familiar.
Dude, this guy is entertaining as hell. He basically like he goes into full detail about all the different things that he wants to review. Like he will talk about different bits of kibble, he will talk about points of articulation, he will go full frontal detail about everything. And I mean full frontal indeed, because sometimes he will get uh, but the way that he does it, he also presents himself as a character who really like just goes into comedic bits. Now he ended up doing a review of this Stegzero, or Snarl, however you want to call it, and it is beautiful. It just looks so cool. Now, this thing right now, if you bought it on tfsafari.com, it ships from China. So after you buy it, it comes in within a couple weeks. This thing right now is $154.99. Used to be a lot more. Buying it on its own, just as Snarl, it is a massive box. Do you remember when I sent you the picture of just the box itself, just the UPS box?
I don't know if you gave me a frame of reference for that.
So basically, when I pulled it out from my P.O. box, it took up the entire size of the P.O. box because they ended up having to put it into like their giant repository one, where basically, hey, this is too big for your P.O. box. We're gonna put it elsewhere. It was about as the biggest size of what they moved it up to. And after pulling it out, I set it on top of my car and I put a giant picture next to it. I put a giant picture. I ended up taking a picture of it, sitting it on my car. Thing is fucking huge. I pulled the box from inside outside of it. That entire box literally filled the entire length of the entire packaging. It's huge. Now, the transformer itself is massive. It is, like, if I look up the actual specifications on it right now, it's 36 centimeters tall from head to toe. And while it's in Stegosaurus mode, 43 centimeters long. This thing is massive. It is by far one of the coolest things I have ever seen. Will, have I taken it out of the package yet? No.
No, no, that's
Of course not. Now, do I plan on it? Eventually I do, because originally I was thinking about maybe not opening it, but then I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? I think I will wait until I manage to get all five of these particular toys that they ended up, planning.
that's gonna
So
be
the
big.
next one that's supposed to come out, Oh my god, it's I can't wait to see what happens. So I'm at TF Safari right now just to type in Volcanicus to see what comes up. Now, it looks like that the next one coming out is going to be their version of Swoop, which is the pterodactyl.
Hmm.
Dude, it's already cool. Like just looking at the pterodactyl form, oh man, it's red, gold, black, silver. Oh, it just looks so cool. And I don't know when it's coming out because it's currently only on pre-order. Man, I really want to know. It says quarter two, quarter three of 2024. Supposedly, it may come out this year. I don't know how much it's going to cost. If anything, it may cost within the same range as the Snarl did. But it looks really cool. And the next one that's coming out after that, it's going to be number 3, and that one is going to be Slag. Or because apparently Slag is a insensitive term these days, Slug. So it's going to be their version of Slug, which is a Triceratops. And right now you only see like the prototype version of it where it's like all white. But just looking at it, it literally looks like something that came out of Dark Soul. It just looks so cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I can't wait. So yeah, these things are really cool. Third party is generally really cool when they get made properly. I actually did buy some. I don't remember if I talked about it on the previous ones, and if I did, I'm so sorry. But I also did buy some recently based off of the Bumblebee movie. Do you remember the different Decepticons in that movie?
I do not. I think I still need to watch that one too.
Well, lucky for you that that's going to be one of
Oh,
the things that we have to watch for
I
this
do
thing.
remember that they faked everybody out and they thought it was going to be Starscream and it's not. It's somebody else with his old paint scheme.
Oh, Thundercracker, I think.
To be fair, Thundercracker, Skywarp, and Starscream are all from a group.
Interchangeable. Yeah.
Paint scheme wise, they are literally just palette swaps, and they're not even the only ones. There's an A team, B team, and like C tier when you go like into the franchise of Decepticons who are the exact same build as Starscream because they're all part of a specific group. Their whole thing was that they fly and they
Mm-hmm.
take care of the air. Starscream was just their leader at one point. That's the
Yeah.
only reason he's very
Um.
famous. That and he was used by Megatron, but
True. But with the if you haven't seen Bumblebee, then there's a
fine.
couple different Decepticons in Bumblebee.
Hmm?
Two of them are actually triple
Oh,
changers.
nice.
Yeah. And Hasbro never released these Decepticons as triple changers. They released them as you get them as one mode or you get them as another mode, but you can't get them as both.
It's just them being lazy.
So,
I understand it's hard, and I understand it's not an easy thing to do, or to make them look good. Generally, there'll be like one or two forms that look good, but occasionally Hasbro will release some real solid triple changers.
well, yeah, I remember looking back at Optimal Optimus. I'm like, the only way that you can actually get something that good is by having something incredibly huge.
Hmm.
That's the only way that they were able to do it back
You
then.
need the space.
But this one, exactly. Now, this one, it is pretty big, but it's not as big as you would expect. And the one that I got goes from car to robot to jet.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm like, you know what? That's dope. I gotta get that. So I ended up getting that, and then I also ended up also getting another triple changer. I ended up getting Ravage. Do you remember Ravage?
Sounds familiar.
So Ravage was the one who was basically he ended up becoming a quick little plot point in Beast Wars. But he played a Russian spy Decepticon who ended up defecting, but then ended up saying Decepticons forever. And then, but basically he is a cat like transformer or panther rather. He's a panther
Oh yeah,
transformer.
yeah.
So he goes from Panther to Car to Jet as well because I just really like Jet.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm like, you know what? Those are pretty cool. But yeah, man, I'm just really excited that we're getting all these different third party things. But back to what we were talking about before, which is Transformers Fall of Cybertron. So you get to play as only Dinobot that you get to play as is Grimlock, but honestly, it's worth it because you get to see how powerful he is. You don't get to do any kind of different combinations for him. You just get to see him meet up with all but one of his teammates, and they basically learn how they're dinosaurs now and how Shockwave basically turned them into dinosaurs because, he's a sick son of a bitch.
Got some
And
problems.
once they all, yeah, and then once they all realize that the Decepticons are trying to basically use a space warp to get from Cybertron to from what appears to be planet Earth, they want to go ahead and try to stop them. So Grimlock is all about trying to get that to stop.
Mm-hmm.
So when he does that, he ends up going to basically go. He eats Shockwave. He just straight up eats him, like right at the space warp
Yep.
bridge. Ends up blowing all that up. The Ark ends up going lift off by Metroplex sacrificing its spark, using that as energon reserves for the Ark, and everybody blasts off. Basically, the Ark is going off, the Decepticons' Nemesis goes off, and then the final level, it literally switches between Decepticons and Autobots back to back for each different event. You actually get to a point where you get to be Bruticus again, and you're basically destroying the Ark that you're trying to save. And right after you do that moment, you're back to Jazz, and you do this really cool event where you're going around trying to take down Bruticus, and you're trying to launch basically giant star missiles at him, or star lasers, like guided star lasers at him. It's so cool. And then the final moment, it's a sword fight between Megatron and Optimus.
Mm-hmm.
And they force you to pick between who to choose, either Optimus or Megatron. Will, who did you pick?
I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember at the very end. Been
Well,
a long time.
I almost picked Megatron because I have an itchy trigger finger. But I ended up picking Optimus because I realized that good needs to win.
I
The
mean,
only thing that was disappointing about this game was that they basically left it open to see, like, oh, where could this lead? But then I realized, like, even though I wanted a little bit of closure, it basically would have been, well, this is essentially where G1
yeah.
starts.
So they would have been a retelling of G1 based off of their version. A lot of what they do for like games and stuff is retellings. It would be fun to see them adapt some of the wackier animated universes into a video game because
Oh,
that would be unique.
yeah,
I mean, okay,
absolutely.
I say that like we've got some sort of a, you know, wide range to choose from. We don't really have a ton of Transformers titles at the moment. It's mostly heavily mobile or mobile adjacent titles. They're not
Well,
allowing anyone to like do anything interesting with the IP. You're sure not getting, High Moon Studios level of thing. You're not even getting like a love letter to the original with like a Transformers Devastation, which was pure, pure camp. It felt like an episode of that show. So you're not even getting someone leaning that hard into the original. They're just doing very, in my opinion, middling. And this is not a knock at all against the developers. I know this is direction coming from Hasbro and stuff. This is not their choice. If you give creative people freedom, they make cool stuff. This is them being handed an exact list of things to do, and then Hasbro using it as an arm of a multimedia experience, if you will, where like here's the mobile game that's going to basically be sort of related to this show that we're running. We're also going to have these physical toys that are going to be based off of the design from the show, and all of it's going to have an art style adjacent enough to the game that people will see it and they'll relate them and then they'll play that. So it's all a thing, which is boring, unfortunately, like from a consumer
that
standpoint.
explains why the next game ended up getting made, Rise of the Dark Spark, because
It
it
was
was
just to tie it
basically
into the movies.
well, not only that, but it was a tie-in to Fall of Cybertron, which made it did. It's not like it didn't. It made zero sense, but it made stupid sense as to why they did it, or how they did it. Because after reading up the synopsis, basically it takes place after Dark of the Moon, in the movies, but it takes place before Fall of Cybertron. So basically, all the stuff that you feel like that is going to happen in Fall of Cybertron, anything that you have that you just played, like anything that you do on the Cybertron verse, just kind of feels redundant. It doesn't feel like that you actually are missing anything if you're doing that. And then as for the movie version, it's like, oh, cool, it's a tie-in to the next movie that's supposed to come out, but then it doesn't necessarily reflect the next movie that was supposed to come out, which was Age of Extinction. So it's just like there's a whole lot of stuff going on for that just really
Hmm.
sucked. But yeah, the only interesting thing that I thought about for that one was that at the very end of it, they apparently allude to like some sort of G1 continuity, where at the very end, the Dark Spark ends up being sent over to the G1 universe, and the Optimus of that one says, "Oh, I had a very bad feeling about this," or some shit like that.
They were hoping for a four, I'm guessing.
Maybe, I
It
don't
it
know.
kind of fizzled. Rise of the Dark Spark is not talked about anywhere nearly as much, and it that was the end. They didn't do any more in that continuity. They didn't do any more recognizably, even tangentially related to that. They just kind of stopped making Transformers games for a while. And I think the next
The
one was
interesting thing
Devastation.
about Rise of
But
the Dark Spark, though, is that the console versions were basically like pared down versions of what we played for Fall of Cybertron. But the 3DS version is the one that got somewhat decent reviews.
huh,
It was a turn-based strategy
that is a
RPG.
completely different playstyle, and that's probably why it did. It was most likely done by a
Yeah.
studio that like knew what they were doing, and they're like, "Can we do whatever we want?" And they were like, "It's the mobile version. We literally know you cannot do what the original is, so feel free, re-envision it." And they were like, "Gotcha, boss. Hey guys, you know how we make
Yeah.
turn-based strategy? Yeah, we're just gonna slap Transformers on it." And somebody in the back probably cheered, "Woohoo!"
It from what I read, I was like, you
That
know what?
sounds
I
pretty
feel
cool.
like the console version should have been
That
that.
does sound pretty cool. A little disappointed.
But yeah, I'm excited for to see more Transformer stuff pop up
Hmm.
on our little podcast here.
I mean, it's going to come. It's Transformers is an interesting. It's an interesting franchise for a lot of reasons. Even when, as I get older and I look more deeply into how things were put together, there's a series. Now I don't remember the guy who makes it, but just look up Transformers: The Basics. That guy, he will give you in the basics on a character, an archetype, and then the first few videos were literally here's how the Transformers were made, and he goes into what spawned them. The Transformers are realistically kind of a blending of like giant mecha influence, but also American comic book influence, which is why they don't feel like an anime, except for the ones that are made only as an anime in Japan, but that's because that's a specific lens and it heavily takes over. All the stuff,
You mean like Beast Wars 2?
yeah, like Beast Wars 2 that never came out, where it's literally a shonen anime with an Optimus adjacent main character who's a lion. Just just sounds so cool. The
Yep.
figures for that look super duper anime, and I'm like, holy crap, that is so shonen. He literally is like, friendship will win. I'm like, oh my god. Oh,
He's
he
Lion-O. He's
basically
Lion
he is
Optimus.
basically Lion Optimus essentially. But from its inception, Transformers has always been kind of a halfway, and just like it sort of started here, made its way over to Japan. Well, so it started here, written by writers for American media, but it was using repurposing toys that were made by a different company, so it was in a blending of those two from the start. Because you had a toy company who were really good at making toys. And then when it came over here, they're like, all right, we're going to write stories and characters. And that's why G1 is so freaking weird, because they have to keep, as the new waves come out, they basically write off the entire first round. And they're like, okay, here's the new ones, put those in the show. So it's just this crazy commercial for toys. GI Joe was the original GI Joe was that, as was the original Transformers. It's just weird that both of those have gone on to be way more in depth in different things than that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's nuts. Don't forget what's the knockoff one that everybody likes to make fun of? Even in Clerks 2, one of my
Transmorphers?
favorite movies. No,
Oh,
GoBots.
so GoBots isn't knockoff's a strong word. It's not so much a knockoff. Like, yeah, it's very clearly trying to cash in, but I don't know that I would say knockoff. I would say it's the like cousin of the Transformers from still the 80s, and it's very, very weird and very, very different. You can look it up. I think it just started getting some re-releases in toys and also in physical, like go watch it media. GoBots is weird. I've only like looked into it a little, and GoBots is weird. It also people talk about it like knockoff Transformers in that same way that people try to do some sort of rivalry between Digimon and Pokemon, and it's like, okay, small creatures and children, but realistically, both of them stop there because their theming isn't even the same. If you watch one episode of either, they're not the same thing. Even way back when they first aired, they were really not telling the same story. They're not. They're from the outside. Oh, look, children. Oh, look, bright colors. Monster. That's where it ends. GoBots is, oh, look, giant
Yep.
robots. Oh, look, humans. That's where it ends. It gets real weird after that. But,
Yeah, I remember. I back when Blockbuster,
ooh,
but before even
deep
that,
cuts.
back when where we lived, there was another place called 16,000
They're going to say
Movies.
Hollywood Video.
Uh,
But
they no 16,000 Movies. I believe this was the only one that ever existed.
hmm
I could be
I
wrong though.
mean,
Um,
little.
they had a specific section for like different cartoons and
Hmm
whatnot, and my dad would rent me GoBots every now and then, and it was one of those ones on VHS where it had like episodes 1 through 4, 1 through 5, or
hmm
whatever. But they would kind of like reduce it to where it's like GoBots the movie, and it's basically just the condensed version of the first few
hmm
episodes. And I watched that religiously. I really did.
Yeah.
Like I was really big into trying transforming things back then. I never. It goes to show you, I never grew out of it.
I mean, you've asked before, like the big question of what got you into it and why do you like giant robots? Why do people enjoy media is a question that changes, I think, as people change, which is why the things that they enjoy will change, with a few exceptions. Some people, even though their tastes change, well, a lot of people, will go back to certain media for very specific reasons. I can objectively say Gundam Wing is not the strongest Gundam show. I can also completely biasedly say it is one of my favorite shows ever made because it occupies a special place in my brain and in when I grew up. And I know that. I 100% know that that is nostalgia goggles. That's all that is. 100%. It is goofy. It is weird. It is not the best written. Even I get annoyed at some of its writing, but I still will always love that show because that's what it is to me. I can also objectively put those two things next to each other and go, yeah, no, if you want like a really well written one, you're going to go UC and or a few things that are adjacent. I can give you that top five if you'd like. It's like if you want writing, go over here. If you're okay with it being a little weird and also a little heavily loose with its own silly stuff, just know what you're getting into.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But I think that's really all that I want to cover when it comes to anything Transformers related. I know that we didn't talk about Medabots this time, and that's completely fine. Gives us enough breathing room to go ahead and try and have people try to catch up to it and possibly maybe watch it by next week. But before we do that,
Hmm.
Will, on our predictions for Medabots, were we right in any of it?
We totally were. We called one of them. We called
I
we
knew
called the
it.
third one the them getting mad at robots and why. We totally called that it was going to be like involve the school or something because that one 100% involves the PTA. So, and I called
Yep.
the principal being into like liking them and stuff being a problem and a conflict of interest. 100% happened. I completely forgot until I was watching the episode that one about Phantom Renegade. I was like, I forgot this episode existed. That is not the prediction either of us gave. We were both very wrong.
No, it
We
wasn't. We were very, very, very
it
wrong
oh
about
yeah,
that.
no, we were very wrong. I don't want to go too into it because we're going to talk about it next time, but we were that was not the direction I was going or you. We were wrong.
Nope.
What was the episode before
Very.
that one? What was the name of that one?
Uh, Introduction of Rokusho.
So, I mean, that we just assumed, and it was Rakusho's introduction. It was that they weren't hiding
Yeah.
it. It you just yeah, that's when we're gonna drop that little seed of let's go forward and have more stuff later, which is what they did. I mean, that's
Yeah.
we'll talk about it more next time, but yeah, that's we called that one because of course
So I'm excited to talk about those next time. But yeah, man, it was. I can't believe we were wrong about
that
that one.
that
But
second one I was
I'll
like,
definitely.
oh no, this is an episode I remember this. Also, wow, I forgot this.
I was pleasantly
Yeah.
surprised that we were
Yeah,
wrong,
no.
but I was also happy with what we
Yeah,
got.
and also that I think that character will come back more than once, so that'll be interesting.
I I hope so. I absolutely hope
Yeah.
so. But Will, thank you for joining me this evening. Do you have any kind of mecha plans coming up?
Um, I am genuinely going to. Oop,
I'll give you a hint. I don't give a fuck.
you dirty bitch.
With that being said, have a good night, everyone.
Take care.
And don't forget, you've been listening to Big Mecha, but not
Pew
huge.
pew pew pew.
Deuces.